Hey, badass listeners. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast yourself, but are just too overwhelmed, or you don't know where to start? You don't know what to talk about, or you think you have a lot to talk about, but you don't know how the heck to get started. So if you are pod curious, I am going to be having a couple of Q&A jam sessions in January, and I would love to see you there. We'll answer your questions. We'll give you some actionable tips, and you can get ready to launch your podcast in 2026. What the hell are you waiting for? There's a link in the show notes. Just click on I'm Pod Curious, and you can get registered for those events. See you soon. You're listening to Midlife Strategies for Badass Women, the no BS podcast for women over 40 who are sick of playing by someone else's rules. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, badass midlife strategist, truth teller, and professional fire starter for midlife reinvention. Around here, we don't do fluff. We do real talk, bold strategies, and badass breakthroughs. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's your damn power move. If you're all in, unapologetic, and ready to reinvent, let's get started. Hello, beautiful listener. Thank you for showing up today and listening to another episode of Midlife Strategies for Badass Women. Today's guest is the deeply wise and compassionate Dr. Kirsten Viola-Harrison. She's a trauma psychologist, author, and founder of Soulwise Solutions. For over 35 years, Dr. Harrison has walked alongside individuals navigating some of life's most complex and transformative experiences. From complex PTSD and schizophrenia to dissociative identity disorder and near-death awakenings. She is also the co-author of Shauna, the powerful true story of an intersex woman living with schizophrenia whose life journey challenges stigma and calls us all into greater empathy, dignity, and soul-level healing. Dr. Harrison's work is at the intersection of psychology and spirituality, offering a rare, profound lens on trauma, resilience, and the human spirit. Dr. Harrison, welcome.
Hey, Sue. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here today. And we have had a previous conversation, and it was so much fun. And I couldn't wait to get you on and have you on my podcast. And so I'm really excited for you to be here today.
Oh, likewise. So, this is exciting.
Where do you want to jump off? I mean, that is a lot of stuff you got going on there. And it's also just so juicy. And I just can't wait to dig in. I think what I want to do is talk about, like, as a psychologist, right?
Yeah.
Why did you decide to go down the path of trauma? Especially. And that's, I mean, because, trauma and schizophrenia and all of those things, I mean, those are, like you said, those are some pretty heavy topics.
Yeah. Well, I'll kind of preface that by saying I'll be turning 60 next year. So the trauma field has changed profoundly in that amount of time. So, a quick synopsis. My first husband, met him in high school. He was adopted by a well-meaning family in the Midwest, wonderful people, but he had lived the first 5 years in South America in an orphanage. So unbeknownst to me on our first date, I was enraptured by his stories, but I didn't know how that was going to play out. So 16 years of like lots of PTSD reactions, lots of kind of like immersion into a lot of trauma. And so during that time, I was interested in languages and whatever. I was going to Georgetown to pursue all of that, but I shifted quickly to psychology because I was like, he needs help and I need to help him. Of course, like any good, empath would do. And so, after that, and I also had parents who had gone through a lot growing up in wartime in Europe. And so they had always fed me books that had a lot to do with resilience, surviving trauma. And so I did develop a lot of capacity to try to understand and have this like imperative to feel like I could help. If I could, pay it forward, help. And so then tragically, my brother passed in an accident a few years later. And so then my trauma life got real for me, and also understanding voices that I had never heard before, like people who had come back from near-death experiences and people who, so no longer was it just trauma, people talking about how they left their bodies, maybe were held by angels or playing with angels up in a playground. All of a sudden now I'm hearing people who had, cardiac arrest, something coming back and saying, you will not believe where I just was. And so I was so intrigued because they had so much to teach each other, so much overlap. And so when everyone's arguing about the biological mechanisms of the brain, the anoxia, ketamine hypotheses, and it's like, but wait a second, something also is happening similarly with these people with severe trauma. And it just became more and more apparent to me that we're talking about a soul level here. And over time, both fields, the near-death experience field and through the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which is an incredible organization and conference, brings a lot of survivors, people who have experienced really amazing things, along with the PhDs, the MDs, to come in and give veracity. It just became undeniable to me that there's a huge overlap. There's a huge need. My trauma studies propelled forward at warp speed because I just lived and breathed it. I wanted to help heal my husband at the time. I wanted to understand more fully what was going on, what's the nature of consciousness, where do we go when we die, all of these profound things. But again, back in the day, the people who had the most, the disorder, that what used to be called multiple personality disorder, now it's called dissociative identity disorder. That was the one diagnosis that really had trauma at its fore. You're not going to develop DID without a severe trauma background. And it's very much about how the mind splits the behavior, the affect, the sensation, and the knowledge from each other. If you and I maybe recollect an event, we might remember the behavior, the emotion, the sensation, and the knowledge. Whereas in severe trauma, it's too big to hold. And so the brain / mind / everything divides it into little compartmentalized pieces that we can handle. And then people kind of split off into these different personality states and alters. And so I just became more and more convinced that through proper therapy, through proper research, through proper overlapping of fields, even the anthropology fields with the shamans, that there would be a way to heal people on this much deeper level. So of course I was driven. I was obsessed because I knew that this was going to have great humanitarian reverberations. And so, that drove me a really long time. It's in a very intense field. I got a lot of pushback at first because people thought it was so woo-woo and out there. Now I'm so heartened that people really know about severe trauma and DID, and they know about near-death experiences, and they kind of take it as de facto. And it wasn't like that before. And it was really hard before the internet to find the proper research on things. A lot of us were sort of winging it, couldn't wait to get to the annual conferences like the International Society for Traumatic Stress and Dissociation. That was a very helpful conference. But now I have to say, there's been an explosion of research. And I think more and more we're understanding that consciousness is non-local. There is a part of our brain sort of wired and attuned to another kind of energy field. Quantum physics verifies a lot of that. Energy workers kind of verify that. Even working with autism, one of my stepdaughters has special needs. And she reads energy really well. And so, there's so much that we have access to that is so healing. And so, I don't know. That's how it all got started. I kind of just,
okay, we're done here.
Yeah, I know. That's how I felt. I'm like, okay, see you later.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for all of that. In a nutshell. Well, good. I mean, I think that is extremely fascinating. All of those, any one of those things is extremely fascinating.
Yes.
And I love that you are addressing the spiritual side of all of those things on different levels and how the brain works, because it's not just science. It's not just spiritual. It's all of those things combined.
Yes.
And I work with horses.
I know.
And the way that horses can communicate with people, it's on a very heart-centered level. And it's a very energetic level. And so I totally get the whole energy piece of it. And how horses can communicate and bring out, work with people or help people that have been in severe trauma situations, or maybe autistic. I've done therapeutic riding and a therapeutic horsemanship and stuff like that. So they can connect with people with different abilities and different trauma and different headspace and different energy in a way that it's difficult for humans to understand, I think, and the scientists to understand. They're like, what's really going on here? So I love that you're embracing that side of it and that you've been able to incorporate it into your practice and your whole way of being. So tell me about, so I'm assuming, or I'm not assuming anything. I want to know more about Soulwise Solutions. Is that what your practice has evolved into?
Yes. And I will say I worked with horses for a while there too, although I am very scared of horses. But I had a friend when I lived in Arizona in Scottsdale who had a ranch, a beautiful ranch. And so she said, could you come and work with my trauma clients and also my recovery clients and do the therapy part? So I got such a respect for the horses when I went up north in California to get trained. We had a little boy who had just endured a tremendous loss, and he was 9 and he was really grieving. And he sat down with his little baseball cap in a little corral where we were learning. And without us doing anything, saying anything, the horses came and put their heads on his chest. And I was like, whoa, like no instructor could have prepared me. Yeah, exactly. Like nothing could have prepared me for that. And it was so healing. So I really respect the work that you do. Again, my stepdaughter who has struggled with lots of special needs and very neurodivergent and is cognitively more like 5, even though she's 20. She loves horses. So there is something so powerful to that. So, Soulwise Solutions is, an offshoot. I've always done some I realized very early on, and this is sort of like, your audience, the middle-aged kind of like badass women. I realized early on I was not going to be put into a box. If people didn't understand trauma, I was going to go out there and be a maverick and figure it out. If my client needed me to fly to New York and figure out what the heck happened in her memories, I was going to go meet her in New York and figure it out. Like that was the kind of therapist that I was. And so I mean, obviously there are limits to that and obviously a downside. However, I was like, let's take this as far as we can go to try to really figure out, are these memories like really how you're remembering them and process them in real time? So I did a lot of kind of like things without getting licensing because I just thought I'm going to lose it every 2 seconds for some silly thing like this. But the clients on a humanitarian level are benefiting immensely. And I think also because my brother had passed, I had a much bigger kind of overarching vision of healing and how it would involve so much more. And I think that also helped me too, to not be as kind of rigid in a box. And part of that journey was, like I said, people were talking about horses and how healing they were. So I was like, okay, let me go get certified, figure that out, because it's fascinating. The veterans that came and talked to us, they were telling us the reason we love working with the horses is the horse is big enough to take a bullet for me. And so I can trust that the horse is there to save me if I need it. And so they felt safe in a way that they had never felt safe before. It was, and then the camaraderie like on the ranch. And so there's so many modalities that sort of evolved. And then eventually for me, it became Soulwise Solutions because our souls are so wise, and let's become more soul wise by listening and tuning in. And there's always a solution. And, for example, with Shauna, I'll get into that in a little bit, but with Shauna, she always says, you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. Life can change on a dime in the best possible way the next day, around the corner. You just don't know, like more in touch you are with what your essential essence is, what you feel like your essential mission is, that is going to take you to the next right step. And so that's kind of where Soulwise came from.
I love it. That's great. Well, since you brought it up, let's talk about Shauna. I didn't want to just open with that, although we did have a conversation. I would love to know, like, how you met Shauna, and I know that, just kind of how your relationship evolved into becoming co-authors of this book. And then I know also supporting Shauna in touring and speaking and all of that stuff. I believe you really, changed Shauna's life. Yeah.
She's changed mine.
I was just going to say, it was a lot of
seriously.
change there. Yeah.
So first of all, Shauna's never been a client. She's somebody who So my dissertation back in the day was comparing the nature of the overlap between people who'd had these severe trauma and leaving the body and what they thought was being held in the hands of God versus the people with near-death experiences. So I was very primed for kind of consciousness studies. And, I was always sort of on the lookout, but I did take about 10 years off of being a therapist so I could raise kids. I had one biological child. She's now 23. And then I ended up getting 3 stepkids. So it was kind of like, whoa, I've got a lot on my plate. I can't in good conscience go and give my full all to trauma clients who are going through really severe things and still go home and do my kids with all joy. And it was getting harder and harder. And so I was getting a little bit of compassion fatigue. So I took some time off. So during that time, we relocated to La Jolla, which is a cute little seaside village in San Diego. And my ex-husband was my second husband was a retired tennis pro. So he had coached at the majors and was like long dreadlocks originally from Trinidad and very athletic and Trinidadian American. And so all of a sudden, and there weren't that many people that were kind of hanging out at the tennis courts that didn't sort of fit your more typical profile. And so he was like, I wonder who that person is. That at the time, Sean was Sean. And we were thinking, okay, maybe you should, get to know Sean. Maybe you could have a hit someday. So fast forward a little bit of time, I started noticing that Sean was hanging out. And then one day, my ex-husband and I were driving to the grocery store, and all of a sudden, Sean was Shauna with a blonde flowy wig, a pink bikini top, a skirt. And we were like, okay, interesting. So we were like, oh, that's interesting. And so I talked to there's a Starbucks in the grocery store, and I said, hey, do you know anything about this person? I'd love to buy her a drink. I did get a feel. I mean, my spidey senses as a psychologist are usually on no matter what.
Right.
And I did get a feel that there was mental distress for sure. I did get a feel early on that it was probably schizophrenia and probably also dissociative schizophrenia, which is actually pretty rare. So that piqued my interest even more. And I just started talking to Shauna. Our first conversation, she was convinced that Tina Turner was her mom and that everybody at the Music Society had told her so. But here's the interesting thing is I actually believed her because she was very compelling. And so the next day I came back and I had taken a picture from a People magazine or something. And I was like, hey, I see the resemblance. And she just burst into tears. And she was like, thank you. Like it did something for her that I validated, whatever this was. Right. And still to this day. I was actually going
to say the same thing. I'm like, I could totally see that.
You could see it. And
I've seen Shauna's look. I know. Yeah.
I know.
I'm like, that's Tina. She's got the Tina.
Exactly. So I'm not, to this day, 10 years in, I'm still not 100% positive that that's not the case. However, of course, now we address it as Shauna's, idealized mom because Tina is everything to her. And like when Tina passed from this world, sadly, and transitioned on, I sent Shauna to the Broadway show. I flew her to San Francisco, told her to get a nice little sparkly gown so she could go at least see Tina's story on stage. And it was a lot for her. I knew it was going to be. Wow. So there are moments like that just feel so precious, right? But anyway, to go back, I didn't realize she was unhoused. I knew she had mental distress at this point. I knew she was very athletic, loved tennis. But I knew that the community adored her because she had spent so much time 30 years in the community, helping businesses, helping the elderly, like just everybody loved her. And so, but then there was a flip side that when she does 12 to 15 miles of walking a day. So she does a half marathon of walking a day.
That's incredible.
It's incredible.
First of all, that's time
rain or shine.
Second,
Yeah, rain or shine. Before I started getting her like Hoka shoes that were so comfortable on her feet, some Nikes, she was wearing these shoes that were like way too small for her size 15 women's feet. And she was just doing this. And it was a way for her to release her mental stress through movement. And she could do it late at night. So then she started catching the eye of the police department. And so they were like, okay, you can be our eyes and ears at night because you're seeing things we don't see. And so she was working with the homeless outreach team for a while. So long story short, there was one night I went to Vaughn's very late at night. It was a torrential rain pour. I don't know why I was there. I tell on every podcast, I'm like, why was I there? But it was probably dog food or some silly thing.
Clearly.
I was there for a reason. And she was sitting there shivering. And I think that was the first time I actually realized, I don't think she has a place to go. She may be unhoused. And I don't know why. At this point, I'd already given her clothes from the Goodwill. I'd done so many things for her, but I didn't realize she was unhoused. And I felt like there was a barrier to asking. It felt like a dignity piece. And so finally I just said, Shauna, do you not have a place to go? Do you not have shelter? And she said, no, ma'am. And I said, okay, we're going to get you right over to that hotel across the street. We're going to get you checked in. I'm going to have to figure out next steps, but I am not having you get back on the street. And I was panicking because I had no idea how I was going to do this. So got her off the street, into the hotel. They loved her at the hotel. I got into the parking lot and I started to just cry. And I called the local editor of the paper and I said, hey, there's a new thing I noticed in your paper called GoFundMe. Maybe we could do a community fundraiser and try to help get Shauna off the streets. Everybody loves her. And, so we did that and we raised $11,000 and then we promptly got an angel investor for $15,000 more. Wow. So all of a sudden it was like a few rotations in, I was still trying to sell my clothes and anything to keep her at hotels until we could get her a place. Yeah. Of course, my ex-husband was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just kind of winging it here. But I felt this like imperative, like this, I don't know what. I mean, now I kind of feel like it was like from the universe, from God, like I had to do this. And so she got housed. She's never been back on the street, never in 10 years. She's had a beautiful apartment. First in La Jolla, very tiny little studio. I had to teach her how to use the kitchen, clean the bathroom. Like she was so out of practice. And then she would hang out outside and be kind of stooping outside the Verizon store still. And I was like, Shauna, why are you still doing that? You have your own place. But it was like a lot of habits were really hard to break, you know, and there's been a big unfurling over the years. She had to really learn to trust me that when I said I would provide weekly funds, that they would be there. And so 10 years in, we've had an incredible journey. Like I said, like you said, we've traveled to Euro Pride together, in Lisbon. She had never left the country. She hadn't been on a plane in 17 years.
That must have been a big deal.
It was a huge deal.
And probably, you know, when she traveled abroad before or had been on a plane before,
never.
She was Sean.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Right. That was the other thing. And that's a whole nother conversation, you know, how hard it's been with her documentation and her IDs and getting help and assistance. It's such an intractable issue and it's so multifaceted. So, but no, we had a wonderful time. She started learning through this time. I had eventually gotten her an iPhone. She started learning social media. Oh my gosh, her videos from those trips, like that we took to Lisbon Pride, Euro Pride, we took Paris Pride, London Pride, we even went to Iceland. Those videos have gotten like 1 million views, TikTok, Instagram, 1 million views. So people are clearly, I mean, there are a lot of haters. Just like in La Jolla, there were some haters when the tourists would come in and they throw beer cans at her because they didn't understand. And she is very flamboyant and very, her schizophrenia sometimes makes her very loud. And I just would instruct the community through the newspaper to just say, hey, Shauna, with a smile, again, energy. And just bring a good energy. And then the community would like see that Shauna would then be their bestie, you know? And she had been a collegiate basketball player and also founded a collegiate basketball program back in the day. She used to be class president. So it also defies the notion that everybody who ends up on the streets somehow is just, you know, no good, because the reality is, no, that is not the case. There are people who just are a couple slips away from homeless. Shauna just got behind. She was working like crazy at the Boys and Girls Club. She started, her schizophrenia became more apparent. She has a 4-year teaching PE degree. She was a teacher, but she just started losing it a little bit in the classroom, so she couldn't do that anymore. And eventually had to sleep in her car. And then one day her car was towed and she was on the streets. And then she just made the best of it. She said at Doc, it was scary, very scary. But then I just sort of knew that I just had to get curious about what the day was going to bring. And just stay hopeful. And she did. And look what happened, you know?
Well, that's amazing that she was able to, you know, have those realizations and have that center to be able to overcome the impulses, I'm guessing, from, you know, I'm not a psychologist, obviously, from, you know, the schizophrenia and everything else, but to be able to maintain some level of consciousness around all of that, to present with the positive light and the big smile and the personality and everything. And like you said, there are going to be moments for sure that those things are going to happen. Let me back up a little bit.
Okay.
Where in your journey, when did you come to the point where you say, I don't know whose idea it was about writing the book?
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Middle-aged brain, sometimes I forget like half of what I'm going to say. After a couple of years, I realized that the funding was running out, and I started to panic because I also realized that my husband's patience was running out with me selling things in our house to try to keep Shauna afloat. And so I just sort of said, hey, Shauna, maybe we could write your story. Maybe we could get your story out there. And maybe that would be some way to start getting to know people, getting to know you better. People who are confused about you might get to understand, because she's also, we haven't touched on this yet, but she's something called, by anatomy, she's something called intersex. So back in the day, we used to call that hermaphrodite.
Right.
And so people would get very confused about her and what that meant and why she was sort of Sean and then Shauna. And so we were trying to educate people. We were writing things like to the Human Rights Commission on, for the rights of intersex people. And her big platform became stopping intersex surgeries, that well-meaning parents and doctors should just hold off and not make decisions for the kid that have longer lasting consequences. So that became her platform. So I was like, maybe we need to just start getting the word out. People get to know your story. And so naively, I jumped in and I'm like, okay, I wrote a 486-page dissertation. I can write a book. And then I was like, oh my God,
why not?
I have all these teenagers now. I've got a child with special needs. I'm like, what am I thinking? I'm in menopause brain, so I can't think. And so I'm just like, what did I do? And then, of course, COVID hit. And then I got a life-threatening diagnosis, which turned out to be erroneous. I have something, but it's not what they thought. So it was like life just happened. So this book that I thought I was just going to whip out with Shauna in like a year turned into like another like 8-year project.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm happy to report
how long it was in the process.
Yes,
I
but
the thing that had been out for a while, or
no. So the thing that was great about it is the fact that we lived so much life in those 8 years, and our relationship developed so much as an incredible friendship. She taught me so much. She showed up for me, vice versa. So I was like, the book is so much richer 8 years in. We found her family. I'm a liaison between she and her sister. She still doesn't want to talk with her sister directly, but she would meet her niece at some point, and she was there at her niece's birth, which is really serendipitous because years later it was her niece that found her mom's brother through the paper because of our GoFundMe. So it just became this beautiful full circle thing. And then when we were in Paris, we were visiting Versailles, and I sent a picture to her sister and I said, Shauna just looks like she's made for this, right? And she said, oh my gosh, I almost passed out, because our other brother, who had passed away from AIDS back in the day, from HIV, she said that she took a picture of him when he lived in Paris that looked just like that. And she was just like, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, why did I have this impulse to take that picture? You know what I mean? It's just, there's so many beautiful things. And it just it's all kind of progressed along. It's been slow. I know my dad sometimes, he's 88. He was my proofreader, my everything. And he just kept saying, okay, how are you going to monetize for Shauna? I'm like, just hold on. We'll think of something. So it's been a lot of years of that. However, she's been, I've been supporting her for the last 8. She wanted to move to Palm Springs because it's very LGBT friendly. And she's friends with the former mayor of Palm Springs, who's a trans person, and she has learned so much by contributing her story as intersex and how intersex is different from trans, but that they share the same. They share the same, a lot of the same discrimination, sadly. I mean, especially African-American trans women are usually so unsafe because there's so much hate, and they often do end up homeless. So Shauna makes the distinction. She says, when I'm Sean, I am fully Sean. It's his story. It's his feelings. Everything is Sean. And when I'm Shauna, I'm fully Shauna. Same thing. Her story, her feeling. And so she's like, I gave Sean the first 50 years of life to live as Sean. So now Shauna gets this part. And that's the best she can explain it. And she's like, for somebody who is trans, they maybe have a very deep-seated feeling in their soul or whatever it may be, that something is misaligned or incongruent, misgendered, something. And so then they kind of present how they want to present. And so I don't know. Shauna's kind of come to the point where she's worked through that a lot. At first, she used to get kind of petty and she'd be like, well, I think trans women are jealous of me because I'm really a female. And I was like, oh God, Shauna, come on. We cannot do these like little, whatevers. We have to band together to protect the rights of all. And then she started educating herself more and more and talking to more and more people, especially the mayor, who has been incredibly supportive. And she was like, well, Shauna, this is how I feel. And this is what goes along with it. And I think that Shauna also got an awakening and an education. And so, again, conversation, unlikely conversations, but honest, truthful, deep conversations can make all the difference,
Yes, absolutely. So, and just, taking time to understand that person's soul and where they're
exactly.
From,
yeah.
What, what's inside. You're seeing something on the outside and you're making a judgment.
Yeah.
As humans, we are all very judgmental, whether it's the way someone is dressed, the car they're driving, where they work, whatever. And I mean, those things are all very superficial. But, how people present gives us a point of judgment. And it's usually the wrong point of judgment.
And when we get to know them,
you sit down and have a conversation with somebody, you find out, oh, okay, just because we may not see eye to eye on a lot of things, or, whether they be political or religious or whatever, that doesn't mean that we can't have a conversation and connect as human beings, because we're all human at the core.
Exactly. I mean, that kind of came to the fore when we went to World Pride in DC. I was taken to the White House, and it was interesting because there was a girl who was a teenager who was in very traditional kind of like dress, and she was very you couldn't see much of her, and she kept sort of judging Shauna with like her mom and her eyes and whatever, and Shauna was getting a little bit agitated, and I was like, Shauna, maybe it's not
Pride.
Yeah. Well, no, we were just touring DC.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but during World Pride time.
Judgy at Pride.
Yeah,
Come
exactly. But it was kind of an eye opener because I'm like, Shauna, maybe she's not judging you. Maybe she's going, wow, I wish I could express myself like that. Like, you never know what's behind all of that. You just don't know. And so there's so many times that like, Shauna could be super cool. Like she could be like, yeah, like bless, and like just very like cool and hip and whatever. Yet she's dressed in a way that you would be like, okay, making a judgment. Yet she's hanging out with a guy driving the Lamborghini, getting a coffee in San Diego, like they've been old friends for 50 years. And they're talking basketball. So it's like, once you get beyond all of those, impressions or whatever, then it's just so fruitful to have these dialogues and meaningful. And it was a little hard in Europe, I have to say. There were times that I was like, okay, Shauna, I never would use the words tone it down, but we would like walk into Wimbledon or Harrods in London, and clearly there's some version of a dress code. And it wasn't that she was wearing women's clothing at that point, traditionally women's clothing. It was that the shirt, the shirts were really cut off. The skirts were very, very short. They were revealing. And I was like, there's an etiquette here. So I did a lot of like sort of teaching. Sometimes I would start to get a little frustrated. Exactly. And I was like, okay, you don't just exist in your own sort of like world of one. And the other part of it is with her schizophrenia, she has delusions of grandeur. That's part of her paranoid schizophrenia. And that's part of like, it ties in with dissociative stuff from childhood. So it gets confusing. And so I knew sometimes she likes to stick out as a category of one, and it's her brain driving that. But I was like, but look at how great it feels when you belong also. And you're not always out there in the margins. So in order to belong, we need to practice a little etiquette. We need to follow their rules. And it was like, she sort of started to learn. The skirts got a little longer, just in the appropriate settings. And like you said, at Pride, she could just be who she was, because Pride is Pride, and it's awesome. And I can't tell you the amount of like teaching that happens everywhere we go, the amount of understanding and compassion, how we sort of deflect the haters by like them just getting to know Shauna, and likewise for Shauna too in dialogue. Interestingly, when we were in DC, it was also a time when we were, she had been brought up in Columbia, Maryland as part of her journey as a child. So we went back to all her schools. She actually went to all these beautiful private schools. Like, you would never know these things of somebody living on the street, right? Yeah. And, it was also during the election, and I am like as liberal as they come, and I'm like, go Kamala. And all of a sudden, Shauna's like wearing her Trump hat. I'm like, no, because it was hard for me to understand how she's wanting liberal beliefs to be accepting of her. Yet over time, she's like, Doc, I don't support one or the other. I just try to constantly toggle back and forth and try to see where they're coming from. And that is very much Shauna. She's always got a higher overarching like meta perspective. But there were moments like that my limitations were showing through, where it was like, I thought I was super open-minded, but clearly open-minded doesn't mean you're just aligned one way. So she teaches just 24/7, So yeah.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So where are you today? So where is your focus today? Is it more aligned with Shauna? Is it more aligned with, your practice? Where are you? Where are you? Not Shauna.
Okay.
Where are you? Dr. Harrison. Where are you? Okay. What space are you taking up these days?
Dr. Harrison has emerged from the cocoon of child rearing. So she's back. Woohoo. I do a lot of podcasting now. I do a lot of writing for magazines, interviews, and different things. But I'm trying to define for myself, because my goal is to try to get Shauna maybe some sneaker sponsorship, some athletic sponsorship, like try to get her a little bit where she's independent from my support all the time. I mean, I always tell her, I've got your back till the end of time, but it would be so nice, especially if something happened to me, that she has this also source of dignity that she's earning her way in a way that she can, because she's tried so many traditional employments and it doesn't quite pan out. I mean, it does for a while and then it just unravels. And so that's one of the goals. So I feel like part of me it's like sending a kid off to college. I feel like part of me is kind of like, okay, let's just get that piece kind of moving forward, and then I can go more in the background. And then also I am just trying to get
also go back to who you are.
Yes.
Because it sounds like for the past 10 years, you've been very much with Shauna.
Yes.
Taking care of her and making sure that she was provided for and off the streets and all of that. And that's a lot, as well as, like you said, raising your own family. So
yes, I feel like, I look back at my life with like such joy, no regrets in that aspect, because I did give the best of myself to my children. I best of myself to my clients, to Shauna, to my family. I think the hard part is now trying to say, okay, so I'm again nearing 60. I never am that person like, oh, I want to retire. I mean, I love what I do so much, and it fulfills me so much. And I love all the conferences and expanding into a lot of more like consciousness studies type of evolutionary conferences where they're pulling all those ideas. And interestingly, back in the trauma field, we always had this guy, Richard Schwartz, who would talk about an internal family systems. And that was a very useful paradigm for a lot of people, especially people who were DID. Now, and back in the day, there was so much pushback about the spiritual element, but now he's included a spiritual part. And I'm like, yeah, amen. Yeah. We've been talking about this forever. And again, spiritual as in just something a little bit greater than our own, awareness. Doesn't mean religious per se, I'm sure you understand that. It's just this much bigger kind of, there's something called, one of my mentors was Dr. Ralph Allison. He sadly just passed. He was, I think, 94. And he was sort of the grandfather of the field of multiple personality disorder. And he was the first to kind of introduce the spiritual energies in there and talk about how people had this other kind of non-locality with an internal self-helper. And that was a human divine ally that would kind of like take energies from somewhere else and then sort of translate them to keep the body safe, because his contention was in very severe childhood trauma, the soul sort of like smashed out of the body to just sort of go, help, we're in crisis. How do we go from a higher energy to try to help heal the body? And so he had all these theories that a lot of people thought were kind of way out there, but they've come to pass as kind of like more and more verifiable, like with so many different fields. And towards the end of his life, he did a lot of talks like in South America with shamans, and because he's like, they get it, shamanic soul retrieval, like the horses, like people who kind of broaden their minds and say, hey, I'm seeing something else here. Like somebody needs to listen. So I'd say that my own evolution alongside of everything else is now going more into the trauma, consciousness, near-death awakening types of things, spiritual understandings, and just constantly availing myself of those, the research there, the conferences and the people in there. I always stay experience near. So I always listen very closely to the actual survivor stories. I did research at UCLA and the kids who had a lot of brain tumors like whatever. It's been so long ago, but they were incredible. How do we say those? Blastomas, glioblastomas. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Either way, these kids were amazing. And the biggest point of the research was that when their parents, especially the moms, when the parents got online with the fact that, you know what, the child has an innate sense that they're not going to be around very long, and they needed the parent to get it. And that the more the parents were like, no, come on, you can do this, whatever, the more the kid was starting to draw angels, draw things and rainbows and whatever, and say, I need you to get that I'm somewhere else. And that if you really want to connect and actually further my healing the best, you will join me there. And that was kind of the point of the research. And then all these years later, the ones that did survive, then those people had a lot of secondary PTSD from a lot of the treatments and whatever. So we did research on that. And it was fascinating. But again, I've been so far away, as you can tell, because I can't even remember the words. I've been so far away from those experiences and voices for so long, except for Shauna's, that I want to really branch back into that.
Yeah, good. Well, I hope you can make time, find time,
yes,
whatever. I love that. I love all of that stuff. It's fascinating, and I could just continue the conversation forever. But I'd like to know how can people, if they're interested in the work that you do, what is the best way for them to learn more about you, learn more about the work that you do, learn more about Shauna? What's the best place that people can contact you or get in touch with you?
So I would say the website, soulwisesolutions.com. Okay. We have a lot of, blogs on there. We have a lot of people who've written testimonials. And then, we're trying to branch into some sort of like speaking engagements. We were doing a lot of work with people a producer in Hollywood who works with a lot of foster care, and they have a pathway to UCLA and some of the great universities around the world. And so Shauna's sort of like so into education that she really wanted to inspire and say, hey, look, I was kind of way down here and look what's happened. And so some of these things are just so heart fulfilling. So we have a lot of that on the Soulwise Solutions landing page. And then if anyone's interested in the social media aspect, Soulwise Team is the handle for TikTok and Instagram. I think Facebook and YouTube maybe too. And then also just Amazon, Barnes & Noble, buy the book. We would love a great review. All these things propel everything forward so that Shauna can get more and more. I mean, we peeled away so much. I think the last piece is her feeling she can kind of really support herself and really join life in that way again, purposefully.
That would be lovely. You mentioned, does Shauna have a Instagram or something?
She's all tied up with Soulwise Team. So it's kind of our little team. Good. It's like,
you mentioned some of her videos and stuff. So I want
yes. So what she does, we have 3 people. So she will send all her videos. We will have conversation. We will have text and whatever, talk about the messaging. And then I have an assistant who actually knows technology since I don't. And then she'll post, and then Shauna will start. We've taught her how to start responding to people when they have a conversation.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I just wanted, because you mentioned that, and I was like, oh, maybe she has her own Instagram feed or something. So cool.
Yeah. All right. It's exciting. So, but take a chance on people. That would be my message.
Like I was just going to say, is there one thing that you would like to leave the audience with?
You never know what's going to happen. Take a chance on people. When I thought I had this horrible diagnosis, they had given me a year to live. It was like completely erroneous, but it was awful. And I had to tell my kids. Shauna was sending me texts every day, super positive, super inspiring, saying, Doc, have you heard about this research? Have you heard about this? They've done this treatment. And I was like, who would have known that synchronistically, like she showed up for me then as well. So take a chance on people, further people's stories of like survival and resilience, and just always have hope and faith, because you don't know what's around the corner. And I think, and especially as middle-aged women, we're trying to like walk into our power and figure out what's the next step. There are so many steps, and it's so exciting. It's like a really generative, beautiful time.
Yes. So. Thank you for saying that too, because I totally feel that as well.
Yes.
And I'd like to say thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your perspective and all of the work that you're doing. And for everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend. Click the like. Give us a rating and a review, and I can bring on more guests like Dr. Harrison here and more fascinating topics. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week on Midlife Strategies for Badass Women.